for you because I have no clue where this is going to go. I can tell you that if you plan on getting out of here early, that might happen, and then again, it might not. So I've seen you, I don't see any new faces, so you've heard me open church before, and sometimes it takes a minute, and then sometimes I take some of Shannon's time. So I will say that Shannon said that I picked this parable. I would say it picked me. From the time I've been saved or rededicated my life to God here, this has been my sermon that I've listened to the most and the story I've related to the most, and just felt like it was always, I actually told Shannon that it was a calling, I guess. So when Shannon said we're going to talk on parables, it just seemed to be the easy choice. Like it was already set, and then Shannon asking was just a confirmation. So I will say I'm not a preacher, but I do talk a lot, and I am opinionated. So anything I say up here is really the pressure of not talking in front of you, but to not mislead you would be the biggest pressure of being able to hold a microphone and stand up here. Honestly, anything I say is my opinion, and it's just how I feel after reading the scripture. So I'm going to start off by just giving, Shannon, was you able to find the picture that I had? So I just got one picture. I didn't do a big bunch of PowerPoint slides and stuff because the story itself was told by Jesus in a group, like all of his parables, just told while he was on the street, or just kind of improv is what I would call it. And he didn't have no fancy screen or no the words. The words were enough. So I think the story itself tells you gives you enough visualization and relation to be able to picture whatever you want to picture, because to me that's what the parables are for. The parables is a story that you're supposed to be able to find yourself in. So there's always multiple people in the parable, but however it's meant to be, it's a story meant for you. This is the prodigal son story is so famous that Rembrandt did 2 paintings on it. And Rembrandt was known for utilizing light to emphasize or highlight the meaning of the painting. So in this one, you can see the younger son, the father, and then the elder son. So Jesus did the same thing in his stories. The purpose of the parable was to highlight something he was trying to get across to everyone. It wasn't just for sinners or people that didn't know God. It was for everyone. So that's the only slide you will see from me today. I will give you some more information on the prodigal son. Some people's Bibles probably say the prodigal son. Some people's Bibles probably say the lost son. The word prodigal is nowhere listed in the actual scripture of the prodigal son. The prodigal meaning, if I read it correctly, is just recklessly extravagant or having spent everything. So you will probably hear me call it the lost son or lost sons more, because I feel like it was a story of more than just the prodigal son that went out and spent all of his money and all of his inheritance and had to come creeping back. There was 2 sons and a father in the story, and I think it's more about all of them. Let's see. You're going to stick with me a little bit because I do have a few notes that I want to hit, and then after that I'll quit stammering, because I stammer more reading than I do just talking. Charles Dickens called it the greatest short story ever told, and William Shakespeare said it was the greatest form of literature ever known to man. So even if you've never been to church, you're not saved, I feel like if you've heard the prodigal son on the street, you know some reference to it. So to me, God told a perfect story. So therefore, even the lost and the people that's never been into a church understand it. So now we're going to get to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the actual parable word for word. It's only 300 words long. It's very short, but has a lot of power and a lot of meaning. And honestly, I told Shannon I could probably stand up here and talk for 45 minutes on one of them and probably break it down into weeks of talking on this, because there's so much in it, and I hope I don't get lost on one part and not get to the parts I really want to get to. But first, if you've never read the story of the prodigal son or the lost sons, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. I'm about ready to run it for you right now before we even read it. So I don't think we could sit here and read it a couple times and then you'll get it at the end, but I think it's much more powerful if you kind of already have a vision of who the people are in the story before we ever start reading them. Then when those verses hit, you're able to relate them directly to who they're supposed to be related to in this story. So when we speak of the Father in this story, that's God. That's our Father. That's who that's supposed to reference. The youngest son is a rebellious son, so he's supposed to represent the lost, the sinners in the world. And then there's the elder son, and he's supposed to represent the religious. Now, I'm sure there's many people in here that's been to church a lot longer than me, but before I started coming to church, I'd never heard there's religious as being a bad thing. But really, in the Bible, the religious were the people. The reason it's wrong is because it's doing things by law, doing things by order, judging people. That's what the religious represent in this story. So we'll go ahead and read it. I will say that the parable starts in Luke 15. Jesus actually tells 3 parables in this area. We're only going to concentrate on the third one. But to really understand a lot of it, you have to read verse 1 and 2. And then we'll skip down to 11. So it starts out, Luke 15:1 says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear him, and the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.' And he said," so this is where Jesus goes into telling the third parable. So he said, as Jesus, "There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country. And he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of the country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found,' and they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, And he came and drew near to the house. He heard music and dancing, and he called one of his servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. But you never gave me a younger goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when his son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, who killed the fattened calf for him. Whew. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and he is found. Well, not only is it hard to read the finer prints, but when you got tears in your eyes, it's even harder to see. So we will try not to do that too often. All right, so let's break it down. There's so many things in it that, like I said, I hope I can get through just the story of the lost son alone is enough. But if you really try to get to the part of the elder son as well, which I feel like is the whole meaning of the whole parable, the two together, it's a lot. So right off the bat, in verse 1 and 2, you read that Jesus was talking to the sinners and the tax collectors. But if you pay real close attention, the Pharisees were also listening. So even though they were mocking Jesus for who he was hanging out with and who he was eating dinner with, they were also receiving the same story. So it's kind of like when we stand around and gossip and talk. Like it's a problem because you never know who's listening to you. So it's always a good example to be a good example. Alright, so verse 12, the younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. So that technically meant that your youngest son came to you as a father and said, I wish he was dead. So that's how you would receive your inheritance at that time. I find more use in your money than I do you. Now, as a just a regular on earth father, I couldn't imagine. I just couldn't imagine hearing that. So I would probably go between the feelings of emotion, like right now, and the feelings of just knocking him upside the head. So I don't know exactly how this father did what he did, because he basically, and it just shows a good example of what the father is. In all of his love, he did exactly what he asked. He knew that even though it probably wasn't the right choice and his son probably wasn't ready to go out and be on his own, he let him do what he asked. So not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, which means the father did it quickly. And if anybody knows anything about selling stuff quickly, not only did the son take part of his inheritance from his father before he was dead, he took it at a discounted rate. So he didn't receive it because he sold it off gradually. He wanted it now. So he had to sell it at whatever cost it got to him. So he didn't even want all of it. He just wanted something to leave on. And he set off for a distant country where he squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of the country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs, which Jesus is also a comedian. Because if you really listen to the story there, these people are Jewish, and now he sent him off he's hit rock bottom. He's got to work with the pigs. So if you know anything about being Jewish, not only do you not eat pork, but pigs were seen to be unclean. So they didn't even have anything to do with them. They didn't raise them. They didn't feed them. They didn't do anything with them. And now he has hit what we're going to call rock bottom. He is a Jewish boy without anything, and now he's basically living with the pigs. So he longed to fill his stomach with pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So if you research a little more, I, being a regular kind of thinker, thought the way we feed pigs now is we take all of our scrap leftovers and different things like that, because pigs will eat about anything, and just throw them out to them. And there should have been some food there left for him. Like, I know it sounds nasty, but he should have been able to eat whatever was left over as well. But in this day and time, that ain't how they ate. They actually fed their pigs what they called, if I pronounce it right, keratin pods. So they were basically an undigestible husk, kind of like a sunflower seed. You eat the seed out of sunflower, and then the rest of the shell just spit on the ground. That's basically what they were feeding pigs. So even the food that they were throwing out to the pigs was unedible to him. And when it says, but no one gave him anything, even the person he hired himself out to was taking advantage of him. Like he had no options. He was living with the pigs, and whether the guy was supposed to be feeding him or giving him shelter or paying him, he wasn't doing it either. So he had basically brought all of his wealth to this country and spent it all on probably numerous people. He was probably the guy shelling out money to all of his friends, or his so-called friends, and then when his money was gone, the friends were gone. So he had no options, and now this guy was taking advantage of him too. So verse 17 says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? So there's a lot of meaning in that verse alone too, that can be related to a lost person. I sat in his pews many a day, still lost, before I ever decided to just impromptu get up and be baptized and rededicate my life. But it says here that when he came to himself, so he's basically dying and talking to himself that where am I at? Why did I make the choices I made? My father's hired servants, which are just people that work for the day and get paid at the end of the day. They could be different people all the time. They weren't his regular live-in servants that had a house there and lived in quarters and were taken. The hired servants were people that just showed up every day looking for work. They had more than enough, yet he didn't have anything. Probably didn't read the verse yet, but I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned. He went immediately when he decided this. He didn't wait to clean himself up. He didn't wait till the timing was right and he knew that his father would say yes. He got up then and headed back to his father. And that's where I think we, as a lost person that I relate to in this story, we try to wait till we know we can quit drinking, or we can quit cussing, or we can just be a better person, and we feel like we can go to church every Sunday and do what we're supposed to be doing, and we keep waiting, and we keep waiting, and luckily, for some of us, we don't wait too long. There's a good example there that is just get up and go. He didn't know his father in this time, and it's still to this day in Eastern countries, his father could have killed him. He dishonored his family in what he did. His father could have beat him. His father could have disowned him. His father could have killed him. And to this day, some extreme Eastern cultures that still practice this stuff have dishonor killings. So if you dishonored your family, they feel like they have the right to kill you. He had no clue what he was going to receive when he turned back to go back to his father to beg for forgiveness and just to take him in. So he practiced his speech. He says, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So I read something that I liked in that too. The younger son had two petitions to his father. In the beginning, he said, give me everything that I believe is mine. Everything I believe I deserve. I want it now. I'm more than capable of standing on my own 2 feet. I want to see the world. And after he's done that, now he's come back to say, make me. Make me one of your hired servants. So it's no longer even about what he's going to receive. He's at the will of his Father. So this is why I feel it was important to make sure you know who we're talking about in the beginning. Yes, it's his Father in the story, but at the end of the day, it's our Father, God, that we're talking about. There should be a will to make us what he has in store for us, not what we think is our goals in life or our wants in life. He also, so I'm gonna get stuck because there's so much in that is that if you don't understand it or you don't research it all, it was all God's plan from the very beginning. I honestly don't see how Shannon does this every week. The plan, I'm not going to say that God wanted him to turn away from him, but I believe God knows everything. So he knows what it'll take to make you what you're supposed to be. So when the son came and said, this is what I want, all right, it's yours. You can have it. It's not going to work out for you, but you can have it. So the famine that hit, and mind you, it says a severe famine. Some details say that the difference and the reason they use the word severe famine is that makes it the most extreme famine there is that actually causes cannibalism, is how severe the famine is. God decided that there was going to be a famine to make the fact that he lost all of his money even worse. Like he had to find rock bottom for this child to come back to him. But it was his plan all along. Like it sounds terrible. We question, why do we go through bad things? Sometimes it's to make us stronger. Sometimes it's to show us something that we're missing. And to me, there's always a plan there. There's always God's will. All right. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. It don't say how many days the young son was gone or how many years he was gone. I would assume it was longer than days. But the thing in that scripture or that verse right there that tells me the father still had to get up every day and do his days. He got up and drank his coffee and looked out the window looking for his son, or was out in the field watching his servants work and was watching for his son. So he never gave up on the fact that he was going to come home. he was still a long way off, and his father came to him. So, to me, you don't even have to make the decision to completely change your life. When the son turned around and came back, he repented. He decided what he did was wrong. He sinned against heaven and his own father, and he turned around and came home. He didn't even make it. He didn't even make it all the way home before his father met him a long way off. A long way off. I can tell you, I'm gonna ruin a lot of this for you because I'm a spoiler alert person, I guess, or I'm just gonna give you the spoilers. I relate to both these sons, and I've already told you once that the religious is the judgmental, and the rebellious son is the sinner and the lost. And I've been there, and sometimes I feel. Sometimes I feel like I'm still there. So it's a challenge. It's a blessing to be saved and to not feel you're worthy. But the reason I relate to this so much is just as long as you keep trying.